You can change that. There's a little, if you go up to the top right corner, there's 3 dots.
I might leave it that way. Let people blame you then.
For your last meeting. It was all her fault.
Go up to the 3 dots.
Should say rename. You can change that. There's a little, if you go up to the top right corner.
Yeah. I might leave it that way. Can I just pick any name? Maybe Jack something.
I wouldn't do that. No one will listen to you.
That's scary.
Unless you plan on yelling Merry Christmas across the road.
Yeah.
Hey, that was yesterday. I think we're moving on forward.
We're still
Did
going
you
to
get all your raking done? Jack, did you get all your raking done?
100%. It looks great.
Need some snow to cover it now.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. So who knows why it went like that in the first place?
I yelled that. I was outside Municipal Hall when I yelled that, and I think I yelled it loud enough that Jen could have heard it in her office in the Municipal Hall. Like that. I yelled as loud as I could.
It was very disruptive, Jack.
You could change your name to Doug, this is my last meeting, right?
Exactly.
Or Doug, most experienced race.
What are you going to do with all your extra time?
I don't know. Clean up my garden, maybe.
I like the tree, Barb. I don't remember it twinkling yesterday.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning, Mike.
Morning, Mike. How's Melanie today?
Good, thank you.
Hey, Melanie, how's your kid like in PSS? How's he settling in there?
Loves it.
Oh,
Likes
good.
his class. He's made friends. Likes the French immersion.
Awesome.
Does he play basketball?
It's okay. It doesn't mean he's not a nice kid. He's missing out on something.
He has not done that so far, but he's tall enough that he could.
Oh.
Not all about height, Melanie. You and I know that. Doug, how you feeling on your last day of school?
Looking forward to the holidays.
It looks like we're all here. Is the live streaming working?
I haven't received confirmation quite yet.
Okay, let me know.
Thank you.
Is Jack not joining us today, Jen?
I do not know.
I'm here.
Oh, there he is.
Probably still in his pajamas.
All right. Boom. No pajamas. They've improved the backdrops thing. Remember how it used to come in and out, and you couldn't, if you didn't have a flat green screen wall, it wouldn't do it. Now you can put a background behind yourself easy.
We are live, Chair.
Okay. And we're all here. So let's call this meeting to order. Could I have someone move approval of the agenda? Moved by Director Richmond, seconded by Director Birch Jones. Any opposed? Motion carries. And a resolution required pursuant to M192. You want me to read the whole thing, Kristen? No. Okay. Someone move that. Moved by Director Richmond, seconded by Director Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. Regional moment, Village of Pemberton.
So I was scratching my head trying to figure out what to talk to you guys about. I was thinking maybe of reviewing some of the work we're doing at the Mayor's Task Force, and then I thought I would like to talk about something that has absolutely nothing to do with COVID. And so I thought something a little historical. So I thought I'd tell you a little story that's a feel-good story, I think, and also has a little bit of everything for us in the sense that there was public opposition, there was public involvement, there was seizing opportunities, all that sort of thing. So, and I think in the end, a really great result. So going back about 15 years or so, there was a village did some extensive engagement with the community to figure out what our downtown could and should look like moving forward. You know, it's only about 20 years ago, if you turned left at the Petrocan coming into Pemberton, like I say, only about 20 years ago, the only other building on the whole strip before you got into what it is now the roundabout, or just before the roundabout, the only other building beside the Petrocan was my little restaurant on that strip. There was nothing developed. There was a lot of dirt piles and empty spaces, and downtown looked like the little town that we were. So a lot of engagement was done. What could it look like? How can it grow? Recognizing that Pemberton was obviously going to grow. And, you know, there was all about the walkability and you know, how it fit the landscape and all that sort of thing was all visioned. Ultimately, that ended up informing a lot about our downtown enhancement plan that we did a year and a half ago, and continues to inform some of the work we'll do on downtown. But it was engagement that was done years ago, then that was refreshed as we went along. Part of that vision for the downtown was a market space, a gathering space for the community, something that could house our farmers market, all that sort of thing. So in a very rough sort of mock-up, there was a sketch done of our market barn, what you see is our market barn right now. It was a sketch, it was a vision, it was an idea. I'm going to go 8 years after that, something like that. An opportunity came up and we jumped all over it, and it was to work with the Timber Framers Guild. And the video that I'm going to play for you is from the Timber Framers Guild, so it's from their perspective. And this group goes around the world and does community projects. They volunteer their labor, and they pile into town, and they do the work that you see in our barn and some of the other stuff you'll see in the video. But they came out, they loved Pemberton, loved the project, and decided to go ahead with it. We put some funding together wherever we could, and you know, to jump ahead, by the time we were done the barn, that whole thing, that development cost us about $75,000 to the taxpayers. And that's because we were able to seize every opportunity and grants and jump all over it. But it had to happen quickly. And so prior to that, there was a vision for the barn, for a communal space in the downtown. But again, it was just that, it was a vision. Now all of a sudden the opportunity was afoot and we had to move quickly. And we did. One of our staff stepped up. It was her first real project management job, and she did an incredible job. And, you know, we engaged the community. And we went ahead, and I'll show you the video. But just to give you an idea, when we first started the project, and even after we built the project, there was still opposition to it. It's not in the right place. We should be saving that downtown space for other things. It doesn't make sense. It should be over here, whatever else. So there was opposition. Much of that opposition went away, but there was still some even after construction was complete. Having said that, and the opposition was, why didn't we talk to the community more? We had to move quickly. The opportunity was there. Everything was laid out in front of us, so we went for it. As the project went on, and sorry, to get into the project, you'll see about how it was put together, but backing up before we started the actual construction, the lumber came all locally, pretty much all locally. A good deal of it was donated. We set up a sort of a temporary mill area behind the train tracks, behind the village hall. People volunteered their labor and milled wood for weeks. Timber framers would come over and sort of tell us where and how they wanted things. And by the time they got here, we had all the timbers laid out in the order they wanted, done almost entirely on volunteer work. And then they arrived. And again, you'll see that part of the video. But then the community really came out. People would pull out their lawn chairs every day and sit along the street and watch the activity. If you think about where our liquor store is now, that building was under construction at the time, so it was just a shell. So we were able to use that space for their mobilization. So every morning, 60 to 70 of these people would gather there. They'd do their breakfast and exercise, whatever, and get organized for the day. But we had the good fortune to be able to use that empty space at the time. And then, like I say, people would be bringing out baked goods and lunches and soup and play music and just watch and cheer. Many of these people were housed. They were all housed locally. They were fed locally. Every night there was a musician playing somewhere in a bonfire. There was opposition at the beginning. As the project went on, it turned into, I think, one of the most awesome community projects you can imagine. People got really engaged and just came out and supported wherever they could. And there was an excitement in town about it. So I'll leave it at that for now. I think Natalie's, maybe Christian's got the video queued up. I queued it up a couple minutes in. It's about 9 minutes long. You got that, Philippa? Thank you. So I'll just let you put that on.
Not a problem. I'm just going to get it started. It'll take me a second to get the settings right. If I could get a thumbs up to make sure you can hear the sound once it starts, that would be fantastic.
Good. But yeah, the outpouring from people was amazing. Oh, here we go.
The Guild has brought approximately 60 people here to Pemberton for 2 weeks, and they've all donated their labor and their time and their expertise and their tooling and their travel to get here to be a part of it.
I came out from Virginia a week ago. I drove. I'm not a journey person. I'm very much an amateur.
I'm a second-term apprentice back in London, Ontario for general carpentry. The second day I got here, I met a German timber framer who offered me my dream job. So I'm packing up and moving here.
Well, I only became a member of the Timber Framers Guild in the past 2 years. I've been involved with timber framing for about 4 years now. Pemberton is the first community project I've worked on with the Timber Framers Guild.
I've been a member of the Timber Framers Guild since 1992. And I'm a lifetime member, which means I'll be doing this type of work for as long as I want to get splinters in my fingers and sawdust in my cuffs.
So it's a very interesting group of people, and they're here for the spiritual connection that they make to the craft and the work and the other people that are here and the village that we come and visit. We're here to build a barn. It's going to be a farmer's market, public space. In addition to that, the other goal of the whole thing is what we at the Guild call building community. We run pretty strong hard work days here. We start every morning with a gather up at 7 o'clock in the morning for breakfast provided by the village.
By 7:30, we finished breakfast and we're heading over to our workstations.
Basically, we had 6 or 8 various workstations. We broke down into various groups, usually between 4, 6, and 8 people, and started fabrication and processing all the wood.
For the people within the guild, it's a way for them to learn. Many of the people that are going to be building this 50 by 150 foot structure behind us are novices.
You start off with layout, and layout has to be very precise, and you have to know how to read the plans. And then there's the whole cutting, which is really neat. We use a lot of chainsaws and massive circular saws.
We're building big buildings, and so you might think they're crude buildings.
But if you go out there and look at the joints, you'll see they're like that.
There are 8 round logs in the building, and those round logs came from just up the valley here. They were provided by the Lillooet Nation Forest Ventures Limited.
Many homes are built with platform framing, 2x4 construction, hide all the wood inside the walls, and it works really well. But all that wood's inside the walls, and we just like to see the wood expressed.
This is a very challenging project. This is an aggressive project. There's a lot of wood to process and a lot of people involved.
But I think we've got the right people to do the job.
As a member of the guild, you feel connected, and so that makes a big difference in an industry like this.
Community building projects have become a staple of our guild activity. We've been doing them for 25 years or more, and we find that it's the best platform for getting that education out.
We first had the idea to participate in Habitat for Humanity when we were having one of our conferences, and it was a huge success. 600 people attended the conference, and it was a wonderful experience, and it was sort of the kickoff program for the community building. We didn't call it that at the time. We just did something that made us all feel good, and that's what we've been doing since.
The very first one I did was in Guelph, Ontario in 1992, and that was to build the Guelph Bridge over the Speed River. And after that, I was hooked because the camaraderie, the sense of community was just phenomenal.
The Timber Framers Guild is unusual in that we get together as members and we share. We teach each other.
We've had other people say, you share all this information, everybody doesn't mind telling others how you do things, and it's true, we don't.
Each of the team leaders is someone who has been in the industry for a long time with a lot of experience, and you can really learn a lot. You might think you know a lot about timber framing, but you'll definitely learn a lot on a build like this.
I've got the easiest job in the world in some ways because, you know, a lot of eager, willing people that just, you know, wait, stop, tell me that again.
I've met a lot of these people before in other builds, and we all come together and we love each other's company, and I love to learn from these people. They're patient and they teach you because they want you to be successful.
There's lots of education that you can get, but mostly it really is the people. There's so many inspiring people.
We've built in Canada, we've built in the United States, we've built in Suriname, we've built in Poland, different projects for different communities all over the world.
Are now on day 10 of the event, and it's still going very smoothly, and we are very proud of the community today.
It's fun to work with the community. There's lots of people that give back, and I've always admired them. So this is a chance for what I do, and I can help a little bit.
I've had just a blast here the last couple of weeks. Most of my hard effort was actually the couple of months getting ready for this, and so this is the reward for me.
I'm working on the aisle posts where I've learned a ton about layout, and now I'm learning about raising. That's a new thing for me. Normally I'm just a cutter. So on this build, I get to expand my knowledge a lot more. People are giving me a bigger role.
I guess I've been doing this a long time. For me, the entire thing is like a metaphor for stretching kindness and working together and a real commitment to detail. Like, all those things really matter, and this is like one compressed unit of that.
It's heartwarming to see how far we've gone. The space is built by the community for the community, and that has been our goal.
What's more community spirit than a barn raising, shouldering things together as a group?
We have now to clean up, get the site prepared, the lighting, a roof to be put on, so there's still a lot of work to be done. And I have 100% confidence that the community will pull through to help us out all the way till the end. So. Driving into town, people wonder where our downtown was. I believe the barn is creating a sense of arrival. It will be a magnificent piece of art right here in our downtown.
Make no mistake about it, we may be doing the woodwork that's going on here, but there's so much else that's been done by the community that's going to be done by the community that it makes it truly their project and their building.
I have a hobby farm, so I'll probably be down here and selling some garlic.
And we also are treated like royalty in places like this. We love what we do, and it's a chance to just sort of show it off.
Pemberton will really gain from this. They'll have such a beautiful landmark right in the center of town that will bring people to Pemberton and help create more economy and more business for them with this beautiful marketplace.
We're always in search of building projects and partners. It's very simple. All you got to do is call the guild office and say, hey, I'm interested in a project.
I've definitely made some friends and people I'm really looking forward to seeing on the next build.
There's no way I would miss this. It's been an amazing experience, and I plan on going to every guild build that I can.
Thanks, Philippa. So yeah, super awesome project, a ton of fun, and you see the end product. So there you go. And I can go on and on. The cranes you saw in there were donated. Again, the stuff just kept coming and coming from the community until we got to that point. So there you go. That's your feel good story for the holidays, everyone.
Perfect.
That was amazing.
I have to say, you took the regional moment to a new level. I mean, the next regional moment really has a lot to stand up to.
Yeah, if I was in control, I would have paused the video right near the end there when you could see the crowd facing, which was me at the time talking, but right in the front, there's a really cute kid in a bright yellow shirt. And I was watching the video last night or the night before, and I went, oh my God, it's my son. And he's like, he's like, I don't know, 5 years old or something like that. Wow, been that long already?
Can you share that video, Mike? It was really awesome.
It's on YouTube, and there's actually a couple. You just type in, go on YouTube, Pemberton, Village of Pemberton Community Barn, and there's also a couple of really neat, we call it when you watch the whole video compressed, time lapses of the build. So they show all the build going up in 3 different time lapses. It's very cool.
Awesome.
There you go.
That was great. Thank you. We have 10 minutes until our delegation comes. Am I still correct on that? Kristen or Melanie? Yeah, okay. So let's go. We can do CAO verbal. CAO Helmer.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just noticing that our delegation has actually just arrived in the waiting room. If you would like to proceed with the delegation.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, just in case, I'm just cautious that we did post it as 9:30, and if any members of the public want to watch it, they would potentially not be coming until 9:30.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Kristen. Okay, so I have nothing to report this morning, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. So it doesn't really give us a ton of time. Let's do Chair's verbal update. And that way we'll because I've got a lot to say. So this is Director Race's last meeting with the regional district. And I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to thank him for his commitment. Kristen dug up some information from past meetings, and his first meeting with the regional district was in December of 2012. So that was a fun fact. He was saying yesterday he wasn't sure when his first meeting was, but in attendance then was the chair, Susie Gims, Debbie DeMare, Mickey Macri, was it John Turner? I only have the initial J Turner, yep. And Nancy Wilhelm Morden, Jordan Sturdy, Marg Lampman, she was an alternate, and Patty Heintzman, and our very own Doug Race. So it's been a long time, and we are very, very grateful for everything that you have put into this board, have put into this region. I have benefited from your sage advice, your unwavering dedication to making good decisions, making good land use decisions, and making very, I don't even have the words for it, but you have always brought your very best game to this table. And you've made us all think in ways that other people don't. So I am very, very grateful to you. So anyone else? Karen?
Hi. You know, the hardest part about this year has been missing out on the carpooling. And I was an alternate director through much of last term, but became a director at the beginning of this term. And it was so helpful, those rides, just to be able to get some of the history from Doug, from Tony. And then once Jack jumped in the car at Whistler, it was just nothing but debate on odd and various topics. But you could always count on Doug to add his poignant and pithy remarks. But it really built a sense of team, really right from meeting in the parking lot at the Bean in Brackendale and the ride up. And really, we didn't often talk shop. We weren't talking about SLRD matters. We were talking about world events or weird things that happened to Jack a lot of the time. But, you know, Doug has always been an asset on council in Squamish, and I'm glad that he is there for my first term as mayor. And I think, Jen, you're right. He always brings his A game to the table. And one of the things that I'm still working on is trying to be able to sound as focused and clear as Doug does when he makes remarks on a decision. And I think that's one of his big assets, is that he doesn't let the emotion of a situation overwhelm his really thoughtful and region-focused thinking when he's making decisions. So you've left a legacy, Doug. We're all trying to meet the bar. Thank you.
Chair? I'll go ahead then. Karen took I wanted to talk about our carpools too. But it's true, those are team building events. And I've always appreciated how Doug's process through becoming sort of a believer in in regional districts. And that's been an interesting one for me, because when you walk in the door of a regional district, you've been involved in a municipality, you get a municipality, but it takes some time to understand how a regional district works. And I've really enjoyed that out loud processing that I think I've been able to do with you, Doug, and that you've been doing with us. And that sort of coming to terms with the importance and the value of a regional district and regional thinking. And that's really guided a lot of the way I've come to the table. I want my biggest piece that I've appreciated, though, is your willingness to change your mind. I think when people come to a table like this, often we come with our decision and are made. And one thing I've learned from you, and I've really tried to take away and exercise, is this ability to be convinced by other people. So I go in and I try and make my best case, but I want to be able to come to the point where I can say, that's a good point. I was thinking about this incorrectly. I'll join you in voting for or against. And that's something you model. I think it's just because who you are, but it's certainly been helpful for me to recognize the importance of being open to good arguments made by someone who I came in with the opposite opinion of. So thank you for that. It's been a lot of fun working with you too. It really has.
Director Richmond?
So Doug, two people have said that's your A game. Are you okay with that? Like, is that really your A game? You got 2 hours to prove here that you've got more. Okay, I believe in you. Doug, you're one of the people I actually miss most in sitting in a room with. If for no other reason, there's a lot of times you're the only one that laughs at my jokes. And I really appreciate that. I don't know if you're just being polite, or maybe the others don't get it. I know Jack doesn't get most of them, but
I'm pretty sure it's polite. Yeah, that's you said it correctly.
But I would say to add to the others, what's one of the things that stands out for me, Doug, is that you are the easiest person I've ever been at a table with to agree with or to disagree with. You can have a conversation no matter which way it goes, which side of the conversation you're on. And it's thoughtful and it's respectful and it's easy, and it makes it easy, as Jack said, to be able to change your mind or to take the information that you bring. So that, I'd say, on its own is a real tribute to who you are, Doug. Absolutely. And just for the record, you are now the third lawyer I've liked in my life, and that's pretty cool. Thank you for that. But thanks a lot, Doug. It's been really good, and you know, when we're all getting back together, we expect to see you at the next Christmas party or gathering or whatever it is, and there'll be scotch involved. So just please make sure that you're available for that.
I see Director Mack and then Director Demare.
Yeah, thank you. I can't add much more than everybody has said, but I've really appreciated all of Doug's good wisdom. He always has the right thing to say at the right time, and I think you've made us a far better group of people than we would be without you. So I appreciate that, and I thank you very much for that. So have a great retirement. Mesh your garden up, do whatever you're going to do. Have fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Demare, go ahead.
Well, Doug, I'm definitely going to miss you at these meetings. You just amazing, your knowledge and respectfulness that you just put out at every one of these meetings, for sure. And I haven't known you very long, and it's too bad that we had to do this through COVID, the short time that I've known you, because we miss those interactions at the breaks when we're face to face. So yeah, I'm definitely going to miss you, and it's been a learning experience for me. And by far, some of the way you work and the way you think, and just the way you express yourself, I hope to emulate that one day. But excellent work. Have a good time in your garden.
Barb?
Yeah, I haven't known you long enough to say a whole lot, Doug, but I remember my very first meeting, you made a comment about you didn't think alternates should be at the table. And I'm like, okay, is he arrogant or is he joking? And I still don't really know how you feel about that. But now that I'm not the alternate, I feel a little better. I like the fact that you always bring in those legal aspects and give us that little extra to think about, because it is things that a lot of us don't know or take into consideration. So I won't drag out what everybody else has said. I guess I'm sorry I didn't get to know you for a longer period of time.
Thank you. Director Rainbow? Oh, sorry, Director Birch-Jones?
I'm just sorry that I won't have you there to kick around anymore, Doug. When I hobbled into the meeting a couple of years ago in the winter, and my hip was so bad, I could not sit still. And I think I kicked you about every 15 minutes. You were calm and patient and also very, very helpful when I was really grappling with understanding. You answered a heck of a lot of questions, and I think it's been said, you're really critical thinking and just thoughtfulness helped me to look at things differently, and I really agree. You helped the board make better decisions. Thank you, and yeah, all the best.
And Director Rainbow?
Do I have to say something?
Don't.
Oh, what to say? I mean, somebody told me this was going to be a roast. It sounded more like what I'd expect to hear at a funeral when somebody's left us, you know. So, not that I disagree with any of the things that have been said. Doug, when he attended the 2012 meeting, that I believe it was as an alternate. I'm pretty sure it was as an alternate. And when I first came on the board in 2014, that's when Doug was officially, nod your head if that's correct, Doug. That was when you were officially a director. And I can remember Doug suggesting that regional districts were not the best way to go. And I don't think he was entirely convinced that system of government was as good as municipal councils and so on. I had come onto that board with a very strong warning from, I won't say who it was from, you can guess, that what I should never trust anything a municipal director said, because they weren't elected, they were just appointed to the board, and they were more interested in their municipality than they were in the regional district, and electoral area directors ought to stick together, and so on. And so I'd come into the what did we have, strategic planning, thinking that this wasn't going to be a very enjoyable experience or a very enjoyable group to work with. And Doug, I have to say that we got stuck at the same table just by accident, I think, unless they were putting all the old people together, I'm not sure. And I just found very quickly that what I'd been warned about was just nonsense. And part of that sort of shift in my opinion and feeling was because of the experience I had working with Doug. I enjoyed the car rides from Squamish to Whistler. No, all of them, and they were fun. And Doug, we will miss you. I'll echo what other people have said about the kind of advice that you offer, the way that you say things. You may disagree with someone, have completely the opposite view, but you're able to express your opinion and make your argument without criticizing or putting down the person that you're arguing with, and I think that's a a skill. I think that's what it's also part of your personality, and I've really appreciated that. And I echo what somebody else said, is that I haven't disagreed with you very much, but when I have, it hasn't been a problem for you or for me. So I thank you for that. I'm not sure about this retirement that you're heading off into. I think it's just a new project. So I wish you luck with whatever it is you decide to take on, but I'm sure it'll be significant, and I'm sure you'll do it very well. So thanks again for the experience of the last several years. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go right into budget now.
Yeah, we have delegation.
Thanks, Doug.
Okay, Director Race, fine. You can have the last word.
Thank you. And thank you very much for those kind thoughts. Actually, the first meeting I was at was not 2012. That was my second term on council. And I was an alternate in my first term and my second term, and came up for meetings, a lot of meetings actually in my first term, because I was the alternate for Mayor Gardner, and he missed a lot of meetings. And so I actually spent a fair amount of time at the regional district. And I have to say my experience with the regional district starting off was a little bit rocky, because when I was first elected to council in that first term, we were in a bit of a battle with the regional district over the regional growth strategy. And so I was on the side of the District of Squamish and arguing that side of it, excuse me. And it took a while for that to kind of get passed, and we found a solution and carried on. But you're right in some of the comments that were made. I can remember the first meeting I was at was actually not a formal meeting of the board, but it was what's called an electors meeting. Anyway, all of the councillors and electoral directors for the whole region. And it was on the regional growth strategy issue. And I'll never forget that, because Dennis Bontron, who was the mayor of Lillooet at the time, proudly announced to the meeting that he was going to take Lillooet in area A and B and join the neighboring regional district on the other side of the mountains. And Susie Gimsey, who is the electoral area director for area C, said they were going to merge with Pemberton. And I can remember driving back in the car with Mayor Gardner thinking, well, what's left? We might as well just dissolve the whole thing and just kind of expand our boundaries and forget about it. And we don't need another level of government here. And so it did take me a time, actually. I have to admit that it took me a fair amount of time to kind of get my head around the whole regional district concept and what it can do and the advantages of it, and to think regionally. You know, as a lawyer, you're always conscious of who you're acting for in a particular situation. And I was elected in Squamish by Squamish electors, and so to be acting otherwise, you know, on some other issue or an issue which might even not be in favor of Squamish, took a while for me to get my head around. And Barb, you're right, I probably did say that. Being an alternate for 2 terms, it was an odd thing, and I can fully appreciate the difficulty alternates have of being dropped into a situation and not having the continuity of being there for the meeting before and the meeting before that. And it is a difficult thing, and then sometimes you're placed there and there's a significant decision and you've got to get up to speed really quickly. It's tough for an alternate. It's a tough form of governance to do that. We don't do that at the municipal level, of course. You know, if you're not there, you're not there. So it is a challenge, certainly a benefit. And thank you for your comments. It's been actually really, I've loved this experience in the last 2 terms, particularly last term and this term. These boards are made up and the councils are made up of personalities, and it's amazing how they can change from term to term. And I'd have to say that my first 2 terms on the regional district as an alternate were not the smoothest. There were some significant personality differences on the boards at that time. And I won't mention names again, but they weren't always the nicest meetings to go to. And so when Patty Heinzman, who was elected mayor last term, asked me to be on the regional district board, I sort of looked at her and thinking, gee, she really doesn't like me. But I'll maybe try it for a year. And it turned out last term's board and this term's board so far were really good groups. And I can tell you, don't ever take that for granted. It just doesn't always happen that way. And I think we're very lucky right now with this current level of government. As you go around the table, and I've said this to other people before, you know, you can have constructive thoughts from everybody at the table, and nobody's got a runaway ego. And everybody is just trying to do their best for their community and the people they represent. So that's a very valuable thing. And as I say, don't take it for granted, because you never know what the next election might bring and what might happen. But I probably will miss you. It is, I actually don't even like working in my garden. That was a bit of an offhand comment, but I'll find something else to do, play with my boat probably. But I think it was the right thing in Squamish. You know, I mentioned before, we had essentially new council this year, 5 out of 7 were new people. And when we looked at who was going to represent the district, the regional district, we didn't want to throw one of those people sort of into it right away when they're still getting up to speed in municipal duties. Now it's been 2 years, there's good feedback on them, some good people there. I am sure Director Stoner, Mr. Stoner, the Director Stoner will make a contribution, be an asset to this board going forward. So I wish you all the best in your deliberations. And if you're ever driving to Squamish and feel like buying somebody a cup of coffee, give me a call. Happy to see you. Thank you.
Okay, but you can't leave yet because we need you to help us with this budget. So you're stuck here for the day. Thank you. And thank you to everybody. That was great. So let's now bring in our delegation of 9:30, Carrie Tyler. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Hi there.
All right. So you are going to talk to us about user engagement and trainings, or you are the user engagement and training specialist for Pacific Climate Impact Consortium. You're going to talk to us about climate action impacts. And you have 35 minutes, and we are anxious to hear what you have to say.
Okay, that's great. I'll just start by sharing my screen, and I'll just have to switch swap presenter. There we go. So I think now you should be seeing the just the PowerPoint, not the PowerPoint slides with notes. The notes won't be super useful to you anyway, but all right. So my name is Carrie Tyler. I'm the User Engagement and Training Specialist with the Pacific Climate Impacts Consortium. And we're physically located at UVic, but we are a regional climate service provider focusing on BC, but in a bunch of national partnerships to support some federal level collaboration on climate service provision right now as well. PCIC has been around in the climate services area for quite a long time. It was originally launched in 2005, and we have 3 sort of areas of research that we focus on. Climate impacts, that's the group that I work with, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. We also have a team that works on hydrological impacts and hydrological modeling for future climate, and a team that does large-scale data analysis on the climate analysis and monitoring, and that's a lot of the maintaining huge databases of historical weather stations and recalculating gridded weather files, so just correcting that weather information over area. And so all of this is supported also by a really large team of our computational support division. So that was just a little intro to PKIC. There's lots of info on our website if you're curious about that. Here today, I'm gonna take about 30 minutes of your time. It's gonna be just like a rush of information in a lot of ways, but my hope is to kind of set a baseline for understanding of some of the core concepts of climate change that are important to kind of understanding climate impacts in the region and perhaps assessing either which you guys would like to know more about or what will be salient in your own decision-making and strategy for the regional district. It's going to be a bunch of photos and graphs and not a lot of humor, sadly. So to start with, I just wanted to start with some basic definitions and core concepts that we can build on. And the first thing is stuff that you already know, but it's important building blocks. So the first is that weather is about conditions at a specific location and time. And then what climate is really like the long-term statistics of weather. So it is weather in aggregate. So one way of illustrating the difference between weather and climate is to tell a short story of an experience of a colleague of mine. In December of 2005, he was in Montreal at a meeting, and he phoned home to Victoria and talked to his family there. And in one location, it was 6 degrees and snowing. And in the other location, it was 19 degrees and sunny. And if I were in a room, I'd be able to see all of you at once, but I can see your faces. So I can read your body language to some extent. So I would like you to show by a little bit of a wave whether you think, and it's just a guess, which location these features were. So who thinks that it was 6 degrees and snowing in Montreal? You can just wave your hand. Some of you, it's good. Who thinks it was 6 degrees and snowing in Victoria that December? Some folks, all right. Actually a bunch of you guys guessed correct, but there's no way to know unless you have an incredible memory. But that particular winter or that December, it was actually snowing in Victoria. It was actually 19 degrees and sunny in Montreal. But if I ask you rather than a specific date at these two locations, if I ask you about December as a whole, and specifically the statistics for December, for averaged over the whole month over a 30-year time period from the 70s to the early aughts. And I said one of those locations, the climate for December, it's an average of 4 degrees. There is some snow on average. And in the other of those locations, the average temperature for the month of December is -6, and there's about 4 times as much snow. Which of you would, again, by show of hands, think that the colder, snowier place was Victoria? Not so much. And which of you is quite confident that that colder, snowier place is Montreal? By show of hands, yes. So this is just to say that at this one level, we're very familiar with what weather and climate are that are different. And I often talk about weather being the thing that helps you choose what you're going to wear on a particular day. And climate is what informs the options in your closet. So just as climate varies in time, that climate is about averaging this fluctuation over time. You occasionally have sort of weird weather days. Climate also varies by location. So in a single sort of time block, you can have there's different weather in different places. And so I want to walk through a few of these heat maps from NASA to just go over a couple of concepts here. So the first example that I want to give is to talk about the winter of 2014-2015. And at that point, this was actually one of the warmest winters in the global record. And at that point, the planet as a whole was about 0.5 degree warmer than the baseline temperature over the previous 30 years. That's what the numbers sort of in the top right mean. And BC is marked on this map by a little star. And that winter, BC was actually having a warmer than normal winter, but the eastern part of the continent was one of the only places on the planet that was having a colder than normal winter. So it was actually colder than the historical normal, but the planet as a whole was actually really warm that winter. So that winter, there was a senator in Washington, D.C., who walked outside, picked up a handful of snow and said, you know, climate change can't be happening because it's cold here. And this is just to illustrate it was cold there, and it was unusually cold there, but that climate change that was being measured was the effects on the planet as a whole. So there's that variability by location. Another example is of the summer in 2010, when the planet was about 0.4 degrees warmer than the historical baseline that we're talking about. BC was actually having a very average summer, but this was a summer that there was so much heat. There were deaths. There were thousands of people that died of heat in Europe, and in northern Russia, there were these really, really bad forest fires. But in BC, we were having an on average and slightly cool summer. And this year, actually, there were news articles about January and things like that. So it was another one where in BC this summer, people were talking about, wouldn't global warming be nice? Because then we would actually get some summer weather. But that was an anomaly to what the experience of the planet as a whole was experiencing that summer. So last example, again, this is about the same amount of warming. 0.36 degrees warmer than average, and we're moving backwards in time here. The summer of 2003, BC was having a warm summer. Europe was having an extremely hot summer, but this level of warmth in BC also corresponded with some really significant events here that have been overshadowed by further big fires, but this was the year of the Kelowna wildfires. And so the warmer than usual conditions, although not extraordinarily hot, were enough, certainly contributed to the effects on the landscape that we saw, like the Kelowna wildfires. Last example, really quickly, going further back in time. So I've been talking about when the planet, situations that were warmer than the average, than the historical average. And here's one where the planet as a whole was cooler than this 30-year historical climatology. And that's because it was quite a while ago. The winter of 1971-72, the planet was overall about 0.4 degrees cooler than the baseline for that time period. And in BC, we were actually having a much cooler than normal winter. And one of the things that led to is a really high snowpack in the mountains and record-breaking flooding in Prince George when the snow melted with the freshet. So these a winter that is just a couple of degrees cooler than normal can have these really big impacts on the landscape, and summers that are a couple of degrees warmer than normal can also contribute to very significant impacts on the landscape. So this is working from the historical record, and I'm about to transition to talking about the future. But the first thing, as we think about that, one of the thing that's really important to kind of take away is that it's really important to understand the ways that climate is changing, and incorporating that into risk assessment and strategy is also really necessary. It's possible. There's a decade of experience in BC and more around the world to draw from, but it does require thinking about our decisions and our work in a slightly different way. So to get from that historical baseline to the future, want to look at this slide. So this is the same historical period, the grayed in, sort of the wide area that is grayed in here. is the same period that I was showing, the 1970s to 2000s, although the historical record here goes back further. So this is the annual average temperature for the month for the province of BC in the historical record. And so we have to start thinking about the future now. So again, for thinking about the future, this is another like poll by show of hands question. Who thinks that this quote was, "Prediction is hard, especially about the future"? Who thinks that was Albert Einstein that came up with that one? Who would attribute it to Mark Twain by a show of hands? And who thinks this is a Winston Churchill quote? All right. So the internet, in fact, attributes it to all of those guys and a whole bunch of other folks. And this is just sort of a lighthearted way of saying it can be really hard to, certainly it's hard to figure out the future, and predicting the future is always hard. But also just like figuring out the past can be pretty tricky too. But when we're talking about climate change, the climate models that are used for these projections are based on really well-established science that has been continuously improved for the last 30 odd years. And the basic equations for how climate at the level of the planet is based on a really good understanding of fluid dynamics and kind of simple physics. And this is because the planet is mostly water, and then our atmosphere is a gaseous liquid, is basically how they calculate it. And when we're looking at climate projections for any particular location, we take these modeled data that's at a really large scale, and we break it down into smaller pieces. And in BC, PEAK's expertise is adjusting for elevation. And then we look at the regional level projections. So in BC, when we're looking at the future, there are different ways of thinking about approaching sort of future different projections. But the amount of climate change that we will see, the amount of warming that will happen in the globe overall, depends on greenhouse gas emissions and how much the plant, how thick that blanket layer becomes around the whole planet. And so one of the ways of making that accessible is just to think about these different RCPs. And RCPs are just, the numbers just have to do with the amount of forcing heating at the high levels of the atmosphere. So those numbers mean a lot to people who spend a ton of time thinking about this stuff, but are not super relevant for our conversation. However, the red one, high emission scenario, blue one's low emission scenario, and the yellow one is somewhere in between. The yellow one basically corresponds to the commitments that were made in the Paris Agreement, for which there are not existing plans everywhere in the world yet. But that's sort of that, like, it roughly corresponds to keeping with the planet as a whole by the end of the century warms by about 2 degrees. Notice that because BC is where it is, warming in BC by the end of the century would actually be about 3 degrees based on that baseline 1970 to 2000 baseline. Baselines matter. So we have the high emissions, the low emissions scenario, and this sort of has a range of possibility that is quite wide. And then if we're thinking again about statistics, climate being the statistics of weather, you want to sort of keep your bell curve in mind, so that we want to also be thinking about those hotter than normal years and those cooler than normal years, and projecting out into the future what those will be. So if we're in the high emissions pathway, and it may be, I mean, and that is a little bit higher than the pathway that we're on now. So there's some debate about that. We can get back to that one later. But basically, if we're on that high emissions pathway by the end of the century, we will have the cold years of the end of the century, the ones that are unusually cold and have corresponding impacts on the landscape, will in fact, the average temperature will be warmer than our hot years of the historical past. So what this means in terms of shifting ecosystems is that it's fundamentally a different place. This is a very rapid change. And even if we keep our emissions, manage to reduce emissions as a planet quite rapidly, and sort of hit carbon neutrality by mid-century, there's still warming that will occur. And there's a lag between the emitting greenhouse gases and the warming impacts on the planet of a couple of decades. So when we're doing planning and trying to wrap our heads around the future, one of the things that our users have found, we've been talking through how to approach this for years. And one of the things that our users have found really useful comparing these things is that we noticed that in the 2050s, the red and yellow lines are still like fairly close together. And if you pick data from that red line in the 2050s, it roughly corresponds to the 2070s. Like that same amount of warming is just kind of projected to occur a little bit later if we manage to limit our emissions fairly dramatically. So focusing on the red line, the higher emission scenario in the 2050s is one way of sort of getting that sort of generational projections out to help with large infrastructure projects or any planning that you're kind of anticipating that will be around for somewhere between 30 and 50 years. However, our existing decision-making is based on the historical record, and the historical climate and our present climate is already different from that historical climate. There are updates that will be coming to both the national and the BC building code. There's discussions underway about how to include future climate, but that hasn't kind of been determined yet. And so the main thing, I pick on the building code because it's easy, because in the 2012 building code, for example, actually mentions climate change, that it needs to be considered. But the tables in the back are, of course, based on the previous 30 years of historical record. So one of the impacts of this with this heat, we will have increased hot days in the summer that will have impacts on the landscape that could impact water temperature and water quality. And in the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District, these images just from our Plan to Adapt tool, which is a fairly user-friendly tool available online to anyone with regions predefined. And it just gives, this is the map function. There's also graphs, but it just sort of gives this quick visual representation of projected change. So in that RCP 8.5, 2050s, you can see labeled on the right there. And this is the average summer temperature. So if you look at the color scale on the top, you can see that in the valleys, the average summer temperature was about 15 degrees, it was in the green, and the average summer temperature mid-century is moving into the yellows and oranges, so up to closer to 20 degrees by the 2050s. I like to show maps as well, just to show some of the regional differences to like when we get, if we just give straight numbers of change averaged over area, part of what you lose is the difference that elevation creates. And your regional district, the topography is so complicated and interesting, and I don't have time to get into it today, but you know that. So just keep that in mind. The regional variation here is really significant in elevation and ecosystem. So one of the other changes when we're talking about warming in general is that there's big impacts on snow. I know PCIC has done work with Whistler and has like a report. I don't know how much those of you who are here have looked into that. But one of the big impacts in this area is snowpack. There'll still be snow at high elevations, but at lower elevations, snow will probably change. Also, as a result of just the changing climate, the warming in the atmosphere, one of the consequences is more frequent and intense wet days, because our air can hold more water, our storms can become more intense. And I know that there's been challenges in different parts of the region with flooding, and particularly I think this event was a rain on snow event that caused some flooding changes, or some extreme flooding. And I think the rainy seasons in this region are the fall and the spring. And so that's one of the things that, as average seasonal temperatures are increasing, both the precipitation events can be higher intensity, and you can also get high intensity precipitation events, certainly in the spring when there's snow, and that can have a really big impact. So also, this is just average seasonal precipitation. So we have projections here for the change in the average seasonal precipitation. Part of what I wanted to show this image also is when we're talking about precipitation in particular, there's a ton of variability by location. So the projections always have these really sort of wide, these aren't tails, but they have the graphs, there's sort of a wide range of possibility with precipitation. But on average precipitation in the spring is expected to increase. And with the changes in precipitation, there will also be changes to stream flow, although stream flow is not wholly driven by precipitation. You guys have a bunch of rivers. I wasn't able to sort out the water sources for all of them affected by precipitation, but also really by snowpack. In a lot of BC, the stream flow is really, really affected by snowpack. So as you have less snow that sticks around for not as long in the summertime, you have these changes in stream flow. You can have higher winter stream flows, or especially spring and fall because of the precipitation. You can have a lower and earlier peak and lower availability in the summer. So our hydrology team's done some analysis on the Fraser River. They've done a bunch of analysis at really big watersheds, and there's always more coming out published in academic papers. But this one, and different rivers have different hydrographs and sort of different impacts. But this one, so this one is Hope, which I realize is not in your region, but it tells, I think, an interesting and important story for rivers that may be applicable. And this is how the black line is the historical baseline, and the pink line here is the future projections in the 2080s, so towards the end of the century. And part of what we're seeing is the shift in an earlier peak flow, but that peak flow is lower. But the big impacts, especially for salmon-bearing streams, is the shift to lower stream flow in late summer, and as well as earlier flooding and earlier freshet flow in the spring. So like I say, this is just one example, and different rivers have different characteristics, but thinking about how the warming will play out on your landscape and the creeks and the streams that you're familiar with. You probably know people who've lived in the region for a long time and can speak about the changes that they've already seen. And that's just something to be keeping in mind as we go forward. One of the other impacts in terms of decision making is, of course, on buildings. This region is one where, again, really diverse topography, except for some areas, except for the really hot areas and the hottest in BC areas. So except for like by Lillooet, most of the region hasn't really required summer cooling. And one of the things that is certainly becoming a much more of an issue is that regions in BC that didn't require summer cooling will in the future. So one of the other variables that we have on Plan to Adapt is cooling degree days. This is a weird indicator, and I'm not going to explain it unless anybody wants to ask me about it, but it's basically an indicator of cooling demand. And so this is basically just a color-coded picture to describe the way that on average in the summer, so this is averaged over the 3 months of the summer, so this doesn't catch the extreme, like it doesn't really draw out visually extreme heat. So the average cooling demand was low. There is some, I mean, there's none where it's purple. There is some cooling demand where it's blue in the historical past. And you can see what a shift there is when we start looking towards mid-century. So again, the 2050s in this area. And I bet that you probably have experience or know people who can talk about this is again on average changes. And then of course the extreme heats is on top of that as well. When you think about that, applying that bell curve again to this image. So just coming back to this one, because I think there's a lot of decisions that we make where the assumption of future climate is really baked in, and the assumption that we have made because it's been really reasonable for thousands and thousands of years to assume that climate wasn't changing. But now that it is, inputs to a whole bunch of our decisions need to change, and we need to question our assumptions about a whole bunch of other ones. So if we use the building code as an example again, the historical past, the parameters that inform the existing building code are based on a past that doesn't even apply in the present, right? The average climate now is different than it was 30 years ago. There is already warming. And if we're building something now and trying to think about how to plan for the next 30 or 40 years, we have to kind of imagine these expanded design parameters. Of course, we need to take care of the cold that is possible now, but may not be in the future. But our existing guidance may also include suboptimal design parameters. It may include design parameters that aren't even necessarily relevant in our current context. And so looking at just a wide variety of decisions and responsibilities and taking climate change into account, there's these kind of awarenesses that people have. And I've listed them sort of on the right side here. But as we walk through the fact that the past is not a good guide for the future, that the present is different from the past already, and that we have to change the way that we make decisions. Also, how we make decisions may have to change, because where we used to use a single data point, because we had a historical record that was stable, we now have to how to figure out how to put a range of information or a range of conditions in there to accommodate this wider range. But it's also worth remembering that if we're looking at this data from the 2050s, it corresponds to the 2070s in the more optimistic scenario. So again, a lot of information. There are a lot of challenges to working with future climate, absolutely, because it really challenges the way that we think. And there's these three big lessons in terms of informing the beginnings of, or I know some of you have been doing adaptation work for a while, or your communities have, and some of you are coming new to the table. And for those that have experience, I would love to hear your reflections, particularly on this slide and the next one, which I'm going to just fly through. But these are sort of three things that are sort of like mindset shifts that we found help people when they're trying to navigate the uncertainty of future climate. So the big step in understanding the stationarity is over is huge. And that sort of gets you to the precipice of like how we do this needs to be different. And one of the things, there's a lot of resources for planning for resilience. That's a systems-based approach. And that resilience approaches really help you navigate that uncertainty. It reframes uncertainty in terms of not getting lost in the uncertainty, but instead, what do you want to be resilient and how do you let that be your focus? And one of the other things that I think is really important is that there's always co-benefits. Climate change is a broad spectrum stressor. It changes, it has these impacts on all aspects of our life. But because it's becoming a more urgent issue, it can also be the gateway and the opportunity to have some tough conversations about how decisions are made and what is important. And a lot of those decisions can be improved. Climate change resilience can be an opportunity to genuinely make things better. So when you are embarking on an adaptation or resilience building process, the path is not smooth. And part of that is because this change is ongoing, there is no one who knows what you should do, because no one both, like the future is the details of the future are unknown, although we know a lot about how climate is changing. We know far more about how climate is changing than we do about, oil prices in the future or even population projections. So the thing to keep in mind is to start to work with this information, to gather a diverse team of people with different perspectives so that you have those creative sources of insight, to embed information and process, to try things, to collaborate, build networks, focus on action. Know that you're going to have to revisit processes and that you will start things and there will be learning and there will be correction. And that is what this process is. That is what adaptation planning is. That is what resilience planning is. And there's guidebooks that make it sound simple, but in practice, it is always iterative because everybody is really learning this as we go. PKIC's worked with other regional districts on projection reports. Some of these are just listed here. The newest one is for the 3 districts, regional districts in the Okanagan. We just did that pre-pandemic, so fall of before. I've lost track of how time works in the pandemic, but yes, so about a year ago, we did a projections report for the regional districts of Okanagan, the 3 regional districts in the Okanagan. So these are some reports that kind of can give you a sense of what a collaborative project with PKIC will produce, which is just sort of some projections. And I've got a bunch of other resources that were included in the PowerPoint that was sent out to you that just have additional online tools, some additional tools and information for even thinking about climate change. There might be stuff that's useful to you or some of your constituents or colleagues, but I'm not going to talk about those. I'll let you go through all those resources yourself. All right, that is all of my talking. And I don't know how time is, but I've got time for some questions if you guys have any questions or if there's anything you want to go back to.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. Does anyone have any questions? Director Elliott, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. How long does it take to put one of these reports together? I imagine there's a lot of data that goes into it, and does it involve work on the ground, or are you really looking at just information that's already available?
Yeah, so the reports, the reports are co-developed with a regional district, and the time investment is really about figuring out of all the data that are available, what matters in your region. The raw data analysis is quite quick for PKIC now. So we can, the general, we've done these and there's the system and the code is kind of set up. What takes time is making meaning out of it. And so I would encourage you to check out some of the other reports. It may not be obvious how much things are contextualized, but in deciding what variables we assess and report on, because there's dozens and dozens of different temperature and precipitation variables to work from. And I will say this is really just about temperature and precipitation. Usually there was an assessment for Northeast BC where we included some hydrological analysis because it aligned with some stuff that team wanted to do. Those reports don't include the hydrological analysis. Those take, it sort of depends. So I guess the time availability actually depends on you guys, like what your staff has capacity for in terms of meeting and how much engagement you want to do around that. Like who are the critical people to be talking to and how do we get access to them? And when we do those co-produced reports, we work with another consultant who actually does the writing and some of the facilitation, and PKIC. PKIC provides the data and is available as a resource. So the other thing that you get through that co-production is access to PKIC staff to have discussions and ask questions and kind of start sorting out what things mean. Yeah, but 3 months can be feasible. Sorry, it's a really long walk to that answer.
Director Birch-Jones, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation and some examples closer to home for this region. Certainly Lillooet, where I am, is on the shores of the Fraser River, and so we've been very concerned about the temperatures in that river because they're actually approaching a level that's going to be fatal for the salmon that are kind of integral to a lot of important stuff here. And we've also suffered from the mountain pine beetle epidemic and the fire and floods that are sort of secondary to that disaster related to the warmer winters and so forth. And I'm just sort of thinking, I do believe that all levels of government have a role here, and regional government. I'm sort of thinking I saw this thing in South America in this really poor part of town that was like calling the richer countries like comedores del futuro, like we're the future eaters, right? It was very, very powerful. And I think, what can regional government do that will have the most positive benefit? So we have some building code measures we can introduce, energy efficiency, water conservation, perhaps reducing waste, being more efficient. Like, what do you think are sort of the most bang for buck actions that a regional government could take to be part of the solution? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And for that reflection. Sort of that point of action is a little bit of out of scope for what PKIC does, in terms of our expertise is really in helping you understand the extent of climate change, and being available to discuss what that might mean. But even that discussion of what that might mean, we can tell you how much air temperature is going to change. And actually, our hydrological team is doing some research on the lower Fraser on modeling temperatures and stuff like that. There's some really interesting research that will be coming out. But I think you've already got the like common sense consequences of the changing climate. You were kind of listing those out. So the important thing to just sort of be attentive to in looking at future climate is also to decide for you guys on your process. How much do you want to where you start? You can either start with the climate science, or you can start by understanding impacts that are urgent and necessary, and then figuring out what and defining like resilience for your community. And then the climate science piece can sometimes comes in a little bit later. So in terms of like overall approaches for strategy or an assessment report, or like, I have no idea what your next steps are, and that's clearly not for me to say, but there's kind of like the pathway is paradoxical. It's this like infinity loop. There's climate science comes in somewhere, and all of the community context, community values, and community priorities also need to come together. And those two things kind of need to feed into each other through conversation and discussion in this kind of continuous loop. And so the one thing I will say is that it doesn't matter to us where you start and what motivates you. But I think that would be an important thing to discern or think about for your own selves and your own process. Is what are your opportunities? What are there big planning processes that are up for renewal, or like what are the hooks where you can start moving to meaningful action? Because that's the things that really affect change. And I don't know your context, or what opportunities, or what planning processes or review processes are underway, or what policies might be up for review, or what urgent local issues there are that people have energy around. And my point is just that you can start there and bring the climate science in, or you can start with the climate science and bring all of that to it. And there's no right way to start that conversation, except your own capacities. Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone on the board? I think you've given us a lot to think about.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and there are a lot of resources online, and the images that I use for your region, like I say, just come from our online tool, and you can go poke around, plan to adapt, and look up your regional district and see what else is there. And then of course, we do have these online tools that are like free and accessible and easy to use. Sorry, the air quotes is because working with climate outputs can be challenging. It requires time to learn, to kind of like navigate and figure out what to do. So yeah, I mean, I wish you guys well. I'm so glad that you are looking into this. And I think it's important, and I can already tell that you're thinking about it the way that it weaves together with a whole bunch of your other conversations. So that's a good place to be. All right.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and have a great holiday season, and we'll perhaps cross paths again.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye.
Okay, everyone, let's take a 15-minute recess. Is that, we all need a little coffee top up, and we'll meet back here at, well, it's 13 minutes. Fair? Okay. See you back here at 10:40. Okay. Give everyone 1 minute to flip your cameras back on and
Jen, I asked that question, but actually, I think UBCM has some pretty good resources. I started to look at them and then got distracted, but I need to go back and look at them some more.
yeah, UBCM has some pretty good reach to lots of different organizations. So it's a really good resource. We have amazing staff. I mean, we have amazing staff at the regional district. We have really great staff at the UBCM.
Here. Okay, we have quorum.
Chair, I have to pop out at 11 for a moment. So
okay,
I'll
allow it.
Thank you.
Just this once.
One time?
Just
Okay,
once.
I'm not gonna use it this time. I'm gonna save it.
All right. So we have Director of Finance, Ms. LaFrance, here to talk about our budget. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. So I've given you the very first preliminary budget for the regional board. So that includes general government, regional invasive species, land planning, regional solid waste, utilities and environmental services department, the regional transit planning, and then RGS. The City Sky Trails wasn't available at the time. There's still some work to be done on that one, so it'll be brought to you in January. And so these budgets also only have the 2020 revised roll as the BC assessment roll, because the 2021 completed roll isn't available until January. So the January budgets will have that new completed roll in them. So I think we can just jump right into the general government budget. That's going to be the biggest chunk of the discussion today, I'm sure. It does currently include a 7% increase over last year, but I do have some options for discussion for potentially decreasing that amount slightly. It does include the CPI at estimated 2%, and that most likely will be lower this year. The October one was 0.7%. I haven't reviewed the November CPI 12-month increase. Some of the salaries, I'll just jump into general government, sorry. Okay, so within general government, there is the COVID restart grant showing as a full revenue of $502,000 received. And I've transferred that all into the reserve at this point. There was some talk at the GFOA BC training that I went to, and there was auditors there that recommended treating the grant the same way we treat our community works funds from gas tax. So that is what I did for now. My hope for this COVID restart grant is that we first use it to recover any lost revenues. So that includes any purchases for, latex gloves and masks and cleaning products, and also for the additional Zoom requirements and for the additional laptops we had to purchase for the staff working remotely. So I've started to separate all these expenses with the project code for the COVID-19, which is SP214. And I'm still drilling into all these expenses, and we'll get a better picture in January of all of the amounts we could recover. It's a little different this year doing the budget, as I don't have direct access to invoices. So I have to rely on Crean to pull invoices for me when she's in the office. And she's only in the office two times a week. And then for check runs, she's in there 3 times a week, but she's busier during the check run time. So I don't really have the opportunity to bug her as much. So a lot of the times when I'm building the budget, I have to wait to get the information to really finish it. So that's one way that I can reduce the requisition. I'm going to offset the grant amount with these COVID-19 purchases. So I just also wanted to mention that we did replace the RAM earlier than we had planned. We purchased it, I think, in 2019, but it had nothing but issues for us since we've purchased it. So with discussions with Ed, who does our vehicle maintenance, and following the policy that we have, which is basically discussions with Ed and myself, we can trade in early. So we decided to trade in the Ram for a Toyota Tundra, and that just happened a couple of months ago. So hopefully that is the better choice. I know that it would be the better choice. So the BC Hydro payments in lieu of taxes revenue is estimated at a 4% increase, which has been pretty typical within the general government budget. We also have additional expenses right now in communications for potential SLRD brochures and a communications plan. And these are carry forward projects from previous years that we haven't been able to get to. The accountant position is in salaries for the full year. We tried to recruit somebody last year, or this year, sorry, 2020. Sorry, I always get confused with the budget being 2021. But we weren't able to successfully get any, we weren't able to successfully get an applicant. So we're recruiting currently, and then this current recruitment stops, I think January 9th is the deadline. So another potential saving is the SLRD office renovation project. We are still waiting for invoicing to come back for this. There's been some issues with the contractor, and so right now I just have an estimated accrual in the budget, and I'm hoping that we can get the exact amount in the budget before the budget is approved. Also within the budget is the short-term loan for the office renovation. Currently, I've only advanced 150,000 of the approved 350,000 short-term borrowing. And that is because we don't have those last invoicing in. So I don't know how much we will need exactly to pull from the short-term borrowing, but I will hopefully have this by the end of the year. And if not, I will forward that borrowing to 2021. And so it'll still balance to what is needed for the renovation. So within this budget also there's IT projects. So the carry forward of the Tempest install, which started in 2020, some expenses are in 2020, and then the rest of the expenses have been transferred to 2021. Also with the Unit 4 financial system fixes and the upgrade. Those are all in the budget as well, carrying forward with a slight decrease in the cost as we now have actual costs. And I'm also in the process of trying to hire a project lead for the Tempest install, which is set to start in January. We also have in the IT budget an estimated $20,000 to switch to Office 365. The reasoning for this is we do need a new LAN server soon. We're hoping to get it next year, but if we switch to Office 365, there is an opportunity to not need the server at all. So Paul, the IT specialist, is looking at that, and we'll have like a more detailed report about this project, hopefully for January. We also carried forward the potential asset management grant from the FCM Asset Management. And so that's a $62,500 expense with a $50,000 offset. There is potential that this won't happen again this year, but we will see. For most of the projects that are carry forwards, I just continue to carry forward the budget. It's really unknown what's going to happen in 2021, but it's better just to save that budget going forward versus losing it and then having to re-budget and re-requisition for it. Anything else that's important? So the operational surplus reserve, we currently still have the 82,000 being transferred from the operational surplus reserve for the recruitment and retention expenses. So these recruitment and retention expenses were approved by the board in 2019. I think at 100,000. We did use some of it for an intern in 2019, but we didn't use any in 2020. In the 2021 budget, there is potential to reduce the recruitment and retention of the 82,000 currently, as we budgeted 50,000 as additional salaries for admin help. So versus using that expense line in the recruitment and retention line, we could reduce the recruitment and retention line 50,000 to save. So basically using the operational surplus funds for recruitment and retention, which is for the admin help of 50,000 that was added, but then reduce that recruitment and retention line of 82,000 by the 50,000, if that makes any sense. So there's opportunity to save there. What does the board feel about that? If I can just pause there.
Comments from anyone? Mike?
I would be supportive of Suzanne's suggestion there of taking some of the reserve to put it towards that. The full reserve in general government is, did I read it right? It's like 812,000, is that right?
Currently, with the full transfer of 82,000, that was just a carry forward. It's at 193,833. So if I reduce that recruitment and retention line, it still will pull from the reserve to cover the 50,000 in salaries, but we won't have that additional recruitment and retention of 82,000. It'll just be reduced by the 50,000 to 32,000.
I see. Okay, I thought you were talking, okay. I think I'm supportive of that. I'd like to hear from other board members. I know we talked a lot about retention and we want to make sure we have a budget to do what we need to do there. I just thought the whole reserve on this cost center was quite healthy. So I was just wondering if we needed that, we can make some of those moves like you're suggesting so that it's not a 7.3% increase in that cost center. That's where my thoughts were.
Thank you, Director Demare.
Sorry, you're muted.
We still have a few, couple that I'm aware of key positions to fill. So just wondering, and we talked a bit about some rental units or something like that to get the people in. I'm just wondering, this recruitment retention carry forward, how much of that do you think we're going to need this year for recruitment and retention to fill those key positions?
Well, I think that we'll eventually use it all. I just feel that it's double expensed right now in the budget because we do have the 50,000 additional in salaries currently, and also the 82,000 expense for recruitment and retention as carried forward. But I do think that we'll use it for multiple things. I was talking with the CAO, she was thinking about hiring help to find people. So like another headhunter potentially. And what else is in the salaries line? But I don't think we've discussed any option to use it for like a rental. That's a little bit tricky because a lot of staff might be looking for rentals, and it's hard to then prioritize who would get the rental. You know, we could say only for new staff, but then is that fair to our current staff if they're looking for rentals as well?
Okay, thank you.
Director Race.
Sorry. Yeah, I'd leave it just because I think the reason we put it there in the first place hasn't gone away. And it was kind of, we didn't actually talk about rentals or things like that, but I recall we were talking about things like possible moving expense bonuses and stuff like that to sort of kind of one-time things to get somebody into the area. And that may still be necessary. So I wouldn't want to constrain staff going forward. I think this is obviously one of our larger challenges, and I think I would be inclined to leave the funds there. Certainly, we'll look at other options to reduce that 7%, but I don't think this is one of them. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I think as we understand the context going forward, we'll have further discussion about this. So if you don't get a chance to say what you want to, just go ahead, Director Race.
Thank you. I did, not on this topic, but is this the appropriate time to talk about that COVID relief fund, whatever we call that? To make a comment about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
The 502,000. So I noticed going through that there was a mention in the report about there were some expenses or some loss of revenue, I beg your pardon. And so in the existing budget, 2020 budget, and we had the same thing happen in Squamish, revenues went down in certain areas and costs were reduced to a certain extent, but not to the same extent because we typically did not try to lay off staff and do those types of things that might also have lowered the costs. We wanted to get good staff, you want to keep good staff. So we ended up with a hole in the budget, which is, and we ended up getting actually a couple of $1 million in this thing. And so my personal view is that, we fill the holes in the 2020 budget from loss of revenue from that fund. The second thing going forward, and I don't know whether it's there or not, is we might budget to some extent for less revenue and see where that takes us going forward. And then the balance of it, just keep in reserve something that's unexpected. So going forward into this budget, I guess the question is, have we budgeted for lower revenues in areas that might be affected by the pandemic or not? And if we have budgeted for lower revenues, does that take us to a higher tax rate or tax requisition? And if it does, then we might consider coming back to the fund and saying, no, we want to kind of stabilize this. It's a temporary situation. We'll take some monies from the fund and put it into the 2021 budget as opposed to taxing for it. A little bit convoluted. I hope you followed all that. So, but I think there is a bit of a discussion there depending on how the numbers kind of fall out.
Mm-hmm. So So for the regional budgets, there isn't lost revenue per se, but there's additional expenses that would be covered. But there definitely will be lost revenue with the Area C PVIS budgets with transit and the Pemberton Community Center, and potentially other budgets as well, but I haven't gone through them all. I'm just doing them as priority. So the regional budgets were the first ones, and I'm working on the EAD and PVIS ones. But yeah, the lost revenue for sure will be covered by the grant. And then additional expenses too that weren't claimed by task. Go ahead, Director Elliott.
Just a reminder that one of the first things the province did was require municipal in full to the regional districts. So they did get their full requisitions. So it would be more on the added expense side and any areas that where public revenue would come in, but they were made whole by the early rules of the province, unlike municipalities. So I do think Councillor Race is right. I think we need to smooth the budget in the short term, however we can, using those funds rather than requisition for it.
I think Director Richmond would like to speak.
I'm just confused between the directors at the table and staff. Karen and I have had this conversation in other calls. I'm still a little bit confused as to where we can use those recovery funds. Does it have to be 100% shown to either cover lost revenues, which is easy in some areas, or direct COVID related costs, which is easy for some costs, or can it be used to smooth out your budget? I know a lot of municipalities are doing that and saying, okay, well, we're going to apply X amount of dollars from that fund to keep our tax increase to whatever, 1% or flat or whatever. Can we do that? Or does it have to be like directly related COVID spending that you have to produce invoices for that says COVID all over them?
Yeah, well, I have been looking at it, and there was some discussion with the GFOA BC kind of regional district day, which is a great training opportunity. And it is conditional. So they do have some conditions for this grant, and it has to offset somehow the COVID-19, either through expenses, that additional expenses or lost revenue, but also for economic development. They did keep that as an option as well. So to restart the economy, but we do have to have some kind of purpose, not just to offset requisitions, unfortunately. Because you do have to report on it in two different ways, an annual report, and then also on my financial statements, I have to list what it was used for.
Director Demare, go ahead.
So the 502,000 that we've got now, if we don't document everything that we're going to use it for, let's go back to the provincial government. What is not used?
Potentially, they haven't stated that yet. So far, you have until December 31st, 2021 to fully allocate the funds. And they haven't mentioned what happens after that, if you haven't fully allocated them. There's potential that they will just continue. You would still keep that grant and then offset future years. There's potential for that.
Okay, is there any way that we could get a list of what it can be used for? Like you talked about economic development,
yeah,
which is a big priority for our area.
Yeah, so it's meant to be like a restart grant, like for restarting businesses and things like that. With the regional district, we're a little bit limited with that type of thing, but definitely for, the Area A economic development potentially can be used for that. I will provide a report for the January meeting with all of the details of the conditions, how I see them, and hopefully by then there might be more information. A lot of the regional districts that I talked to were kind of confused as to what they could put this against. A lot of them don't even have services like rec centers or things like that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Director Birch-Jones, did you have your hand up? No, okay. Oh, Director Rainbow.
Suzanne, with regard to economic development, could it be used to support a small business?
Well, we are restricted to supporting businesses. It's you're not supposed to support any type of business function that's not a service of the SLRD per se.
Okay.
So non-profit or some type of economic development societies, like potentially the yeah, it's going to be tough to try to develop exactly what we can use it for our regional district, but I'll definitely try to drill down and get a good report to you guys in January.
Hey, thank you.
I have Director Birch-Jones and then Director Race.
Thank you. So we have with Lillooet Agriculture and Food and our local sort of storefront for dispensing our local produce, we have quite a crisis going on in that world. So is this potentially something that might be of some assistance early in the new year?
Potentially, yeah.
Not through nonprofit Lillooet. Yeah, that's actually really good to know. I was planning on helping with Pelt, but maybe this would be a fit. Thank you.
The other service that I see could be used for is the Area D pool. The pool function probably lost a lot of revenue as well.
Director Race.
Thank you. My takeaway from the conversation we had in Squamish was that, and while it did have to be sort of COVID related or COVID affected, it was pretty broad about what we could spend the money on. However, it didn't take away those local government restrictions on assisting a business and things like that. That is all still there. And so we just have to keep that in mind. It doesn't change that landscape at all. But otherwise, it was fairly broad. And my personal view and in the conversation was that we should spend it as soon as possible, just because I didn't want the government to change their mind and decide they wanted the unused monies back. I think we'd obviously have to be a little bit judicious with that, but I don't think we want to just sort of plunk it in a reserve forever. I think we try to use it this year for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I have Director Rainbow and then Director Elliott.
This is another direct question. Could we use it for equipment for our fire departments?
Mm-hmm. Definitely for PPE type of equipment or additional requirements for equipment, for sure.
Some of they couldn't do some things they wanted to do early on in the emergency because they didn't have certain types of PPE. So maybe we could look now at upgrading the equipment they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I should talk with Sarah about that then.
Yeah, Sarah would probably be the one to talk to as per what our fire departments would be looking at. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I agree with Doug. We should spend this as quickly as we can. While it's still there.
Director Elliott, go ahead.
I noticed that there are a number of projects from the general government area that are being deferred from 2020. Obviously, we know from dealing with the pandemic and the fire that things had to be put on hold, plus the transition between CAOs. So I was curious about that 7% increase because I sort of thought the project envelope in 2021 would be lower given how much we have to catch up on from 2020. And so are we seeing sort of corresponding tightening of what we're planning to do in 2021? We obviously still have restrictions we're going to be dealing with for the better part of the year. So I'm just wondering if we've deferred projects in that we got money for last year. So are we sort of tightening up what we're expecting is possible in 2021?
Yeah, this first budget obviously is a little bit rushed. We don't have the final 2020 figures, and of course I had to go through each of those lines in detail. But yeah, the 7% is a little bit misleading. It's a little high because I didn't offset any of the COVID grant yet. I just wanted to have a brief discussion first. And I will prepare a report in January. And also with that recruitment and retention, we did add extra help into the salaries. So I would like to offset that expense by the amount that we increase the salaries for additional help. And that will assist the requisition increase as well to lower it. The other thing we can think about is there are funds still for the 50th anniversary. I believe there's a carry forward of 14,000 for the 50th anniversary, and that might be something we can just take off the expenses for now. I don't know what will happen with this 50th anniversary now that it's already 2 years behind.
Fair. And then I think something that I do want to talk about is that not necessarily at this meeting, and perhaps it becomes part of the strategic plan conversation, but that $50,000 in the regional transit planning. And it just seems like that was a board resolution in 2019 and we haven't done anything with it, but we have a government with a new mandate and a very specific focus around regional transit in our area. And so it would seem like a very important time for us to figure out what the best use is of that money. So I think that is a future conversation. I think there's probably some good way to use it in the coming year. Thanks. It's a good first look at this budget. Appreciate it.
So the transit is also a big unknown because they also received a lot of restart funding. So I don't know what their budgets look like, their operating budgets look like. And if that potentially isn't needed in the future, I'm not sure. Like if there's a plan to boost regional transit already through BC Transit or TransLink because of these additional funds they received.
The additional funding is to cover the losses in 2020 and 2021 to make whole the municipalities and TransLink, but any growth going forward will have to be determined through decisions at the local and provincial level. So there's no indication yet from the province about what their appetite is for expanding transit. Although the mandate letters do talk about implementing regional transit in the Sea to Sky during this term. But that $50,000 was to engage someone to help us further the funding model or get it off the ground. And given that there's now this confusion between TransLink versus BC Transit, might be a good time to actually use those funds and help us figure out next steps. So future conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Wiebe.
Yes, I'm just curious on the recovery funds there, how it would be dispersed between the different areas, like that it be done fairly, that we all have fire departments, we all have losses in our rec centers and various different things. I know there was training and whatnot that couldn't be done. Would that be a discussion at a later date or at the board level, or how does that work?
Well, the municipalities did receive COVID restart grants as well, so it would have to be a shared percentage usage. If there was, say, the Lillooet Fire Department required additional usage of their COVID funds, we could, with a percentage of our expenses, also use some of the COVID funds as well. That's an option. But it would have to be a shared based on like the current percentage of costing. Okay, so what I have here is that we're going to continue this discussion around the 502,000 in a strategic planning session, which is coming up. And let's carry on through this document because as you've laid out, is that fine with everyone if we carry on? Okay, thank you. So we do have a lot of carry forward projects for live streaming equipment as well that I believe we are going to try to implement. We are starting to review all of the requirements that we would need. We're also implementing the staff intranet currently. So there is a carry forward of some of that staff intranet cost into 2021, but it is being used. And I also have budgeted a carry forward of the New Quintal leadership gathering that was from 2020 that obviously didn't occur. I just carried that forward, but we could potentially drop that project if it's not going to happen in 2021, or just leave the carry forward for when it does happen, if not 2021 in the future. So that's another unknown to me at this time. Go ahead, Director Richmond.
We did some really great work at the New Quantois gatherings, and I don't want to lose all that momentum because of the pandemic. So I would like to see that money carried forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. Director Race.
Yeah, I agree as well. And I think on some of these things, it might be too early to make a decision because 2021 seems to be headed towards some kind of a transition year where we're going to start off the year kind of locked down, but by the mid or end of the year, we might be considerably unlocked and able to start pursuing some of these things. So I wouldn't want to take it away if we got to a year from now and decided it was never going to happen. Yeah, absolutely reassign the money, but I think we're kind of too early for some of these decisions. So I would, yes, continue to carry it forward.
Okay, agreed. All right. And that's all I have to really discuss on the general government budget. Like I said, it is preliminary. The 2020 figures will change as well because the year isn't finished yet. And so next budget round, I will make the adjustments for using the restart grant on all the opportunities that we, additional expenses that we had in general government and for the remaining cost centers. And I'll carry forward the 50th anniversary funds for now, but that's still an option to review that $14,000 if there will be a spend on that. Is there any specific questions on any of the budget lines? I didn't go line by line because it's a pretty large budget. I did include all of the transfers from reserve for all of the projects. So the transfers from reserves are obviously in revenue, and the projects mostly are contributed to other services. So you see that at the bottom of the budget. And also some of them are in special projects. So if they're not a specific service, they would be expensed as a special project. Also in here is an unknown for the Area C transit amount. I haven't received anything back yet about what that might look like, what the cost is. And
We also don't know the funding mechanism this coming year for 2021. So I've left it as Area C amenity funds for now, but I'm not sure what funding Russell Mack would like to use. There's still so many unknowns in this budget, unfortunately.
I saw a question from Director Elliott.
I know one of the discussions that's happening at the provincial level is if there will be any, once the state of emergency is lifted, permanent changes to our ability to meet electronically. And I know I've expressed my interest to the Minister of Municipal Affairs to provide for that. We've actually seen better engagement at some of our public hearings because people don't have to drive somewhere or go somewhere, they can do it from home. And so using the restart funds, is this an opportunity to invest in the IT infrastructure that we need, whether it's at the head office or in each of the regional areas, so that we make sure, even if we lose the ability to do our meetings, that at least our public engagement can be more electronic based and really open up those opportunities. And I wasn't clear from just the summary we've seen in the report today, whether there's additional investment in IT or whether we're just using what we already had.
There is carry forward for some of the IT projects right now. But yes, we definitely can use it for expanding the public engagement piece for electronic meetings. I think that's a requirement that we're looking at currently.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions at this point, or shall we? Oh, Director Birch-Jones, go ahead.
Thanks. I really agree with that. I was pretty astonished and kind of delighted at some of the far reaches of Area B, people that were able to watch some of these meetings and have some input who would in Pemberton. So I really support what Director Elliott just said. It wasn't my first choice. I'd rather have the meetings in person and have the public attend, but it's democratic for sure. It is working in some pockets. So I'd much rather spend money on that than like the 50-year anniversary cost carry forward. I think we could put that into a different fund. I would be very comfortable moving that. That would be part of the same probably strategic priority discussion, which is happening in January, right?
Believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Let's keep going.
Okay. So is everybody okay to move to the land planning and zoning budget? Okay. So this budget does include the new senior development planner position, which started in 2020. So it is a full year of that. We're not sure at this time if Steve will come back to fill that position, but we're still hoping that he can. Otherwise, we'll deal with that when that happens. There was an increase to the bylaw enforcement officer's time as well, which is basically a carry forward from last year. So it was increased in the 2020 budget as well. But there wasn't as much time. The bylaw enforcement officer didn't have as much time posted as was budgeted, but I did carry forward that amount. So it also carries forward all of the development projects based on their revenues. So we're matching exactly what the revenue was received for those budget expenses. And that's the Tiger Bay, Britannia Oceanfront, Fine Peace, and Furry Creek, and Wedgwoods affordable housing. We're just carrying forward that expense to match exactly what their revenue was at this time. And then when the projects are finished, there is potential that there is surplus funds available. So this budget also does include some strategic items from the board's strategic planning in 2019. and that's the climate action plan and the climate adaptation assessment project. These amounts are just carry forwards. They're probably larger than are required, but at this time, I'm just carrying forward the budget to make sure that it remains in the budget. We also might shift where these services are hitting. So I'm not sure that the climate action plan should be in land planning and zoning. That might move to a different service, and then we will move the funding as well. So these are all just preliminary projects that we haven't been able to get to as yet. 2020 basically threw us all for a loop and made us scramble quite a bit. So this 2021 budget and planning also includes the online engagement software that is in 50410 software expenses. So that's approximately $45,000 for a potential online engagement for just the planning public hearing needs. So it also includes the bylaw enforcement costs increased to $60,000 for the short-term rental injunction. I just carried forward that budget as well. I'm pretty sure we won't need that full $60,000, but I'm not confident on that. So it's just a carry forward. It doesn't actually affect the requisition. And the total operational reserve is $167,997 in that service. And that is within the guidelines of 2 months at a minimum of operating expenses. Does anybody have any specific questions on the land planning budget?
Go ahead, Director Rainbow, and then Director Race.
Yeah, if we go to the top there, the reference to the bylaw officer. We made the case last year that we needed more bylaw officer time, put the money in the budget, and there was an intent to negotiate with Squamish to come up with a now that didn't happen last year. I don't think we had the timing right. So I want to highlight it this year. If Squamish would want to go ahead with that, then that would be the preferred option. But if they don't, then 3 days a week, because I know that our current bylaw officer doesn't want to do any more than 2 days a week. So I'd like the extra to be increased to 3 days a week, and for us to advertise for and try to hire somebody who would work south of Whistler. There's tons of the expense. So again, I would prefer it to be a joint project with Squamish, but if that doesn't fit their budget this year, then I would want to see us go ahead rather than just leave it unexpended in the budget. I'd like us to go ahead and hire a part-time person for this area. In the next paragraph, it talks about Tiger Bay and Fine Peace and Wedgwood affordable housing. So is that coming back to us for reconsideration? Is that still alive? I don't know who can answer that question, but
that carry forward is basically just the expenses. I'm not aware of the status of the project, unfortunately.
CAO Helmer.
If there are any developments of note, they'll be brought back to the board for sure.
Okay, I had Director Race.
Thank you. It's with respect to the senior planner. Mr. Olmsted, when he was working, was my understanding that he was almost entirely working on 2 projects in the Britannia Furry Creek area. And my recollection is that his salary was being funded by those 2 developers. Could you speak to that? Is that was that the case, and is that the intent going forward?
To my knowledge, that was not the case. We did have the expense in for the senior planner in the budget last year, but there wasn't an offsetting revenue to my knowledge.
Thank you, Chair. So it's my understanding that it was being tracked by our Director of Planning and Development. And while it's not directly correlated in the financial statements, she pays attention to the revenue that came in and the expenses that are going out to make sure that the costs associated with the project are covered by the revenues that came in. And she has a sort of a running total on where we're at with that. And if we reach a particular point where that would not be the case, then that's something we would have to look at. Mr. Olmsted was involved with 2 projects. One of those projects has been at this time reallocated to another external consultant, and one of them has been moved internal, but with the potential that as a result there may be the odd bit of piecework that we would have to contract out, and that would all fall under that same sort of planning and offsetting revenue piece. So it's not recorded that way in the financial statements, but it is.
Director Race, did you have follow-up? No. Okay. Anyone else with questions at this time? Oh, go ahead, Director Rainbow.
Could I just follow up my comments earlier, and I'm not sure how to do this, just to ask Suzanne if she'll do it, or would like to see us have up to 3 extra days of bylaw officer in the budget. And I would like to ask staff to contact Squamish staff, or however we do that, to see whether we can come to an agreement. I would prefer to deal with it now rather than ask the same question again. So how do we move forward with that?
Well, there is 4 days of bylaw officer work a week currently in the budget. It's just the request to the District of Squamish. We can transfer that to the Director of Planning to look at. I'm not sure if she's already looked at that actually, but.
Okay.
Timing was wrong last year. So as I say, I don't want to leave it too long and miss out again this year. But I know there's 4 days in the budget right now, and we're only using 2. So I would like to increase that to 5 days, so that we have 3 days available, and then we can discuss with Squamish, and if they wanted to have a 3-day person, and then we'd have a 2-day person to make a full-time position, we could do it that way. Or if they wanted to have a 2-day, so to increase the amount so that we're up to 5 days rather than limit it to just 4, and then move ahead with those negotiations.
Okay, on that note, I suggest that we send that away with the CAO to have those negotiations. And my next speaker is Director Mack, and then I have Director Elliott. But I'll allow CAO Helmer to respond to that inquiry at this time, and then we'll go to Director Mack.
Thank you, Chair. We will have the appropriate conversations offsite, and we can bring that information forward as part of the cost considerations for subsequent rounds of the budget.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Mack, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with Director Rainbow. We do need bylaw 5 days a week. In the outlying areas here, people know that we just don't have the capacity to look at their complaints now. So we definitely need to look at that. I think it's more than time. Thank you.
And Director Elliott, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that the requirement is for a dedicated resource south of Whistler, or dedicated time by this bylaw budget item of from 2 days a week to 4. I'm just, not to say that the District of Squamish wouldn't be interested in this conversation. We're currently working on our public safety master plan, which includes bylaw. But I'm wondering if it's just about more bylaw resources generally for the regional district, or is Director Rainbow, through the chair, very interested, or more specifically interested in a resource specifically for the southern portion? Because that makes a difference how we budget or figure this out. And Director Mack has mentioned the same thing, more generally, a better bylaw presence in his area as well. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, are we talking about 2 different resources, one focus north, one focus south, or one person that just is 5 days a week, or at least coverage 5 days a week that can go north and south?
Go ahead, Director Rainbow.
I'm speaking selfishly as Director of Area D. Questions why bother to have these laws in place if we don't enforce them, and so on and so forth. And there is plenty of work in the Upper Squamish Valley, in Furry Creek, in Britannia Beach. Not new work to justify somebody working, I would say at least 2 days a week, maybe 3, south of Whistler. So yeah, I'm speaking as Director of Area D. Now, if I want to follow Russell's example there and think more regionally, I would expect Sal and or Director DeMere and Director Birch-Jones to be speaking up and saying, hey, how about we have some bylaw presence in A and B, and maybe we do that independently, or maybe we do that in conjunction with the village of Lillooet, or whatever district of Lillooet. We don't have enough bylaw officers to do the work that is needed. So yeah, I was just speaking for Area D, but I think there's a need in the other parts of the region as well.
I have Director Crompton, then Director Race.
I apologize if this has already been asked and answered. This cost center comes out of general government, or does it come out of, where does bylaw come from, as far as where do we pay for it?
It's a part of the land planning and zoning budget, which is all participants.
Yeah. If we're going to be I mean, previously when we increased it a bit, it made some sense. As we continue to grow this, to me, this seems like something that if Area D wants to increase the amount of bylaw presence in Area D should fund it, and not Area A. So if we could find some way of setting up a cost center that's specific to those areas, I think it would attribute the cost in a more reasonable fashion.
Okay, Director Race.
Thank you. It's just on this topic generally, I tend to agree with Director Rainbow and Director Mack actually that I mean, we've seen what has happened over the past year with the influx of people who might otherwise not have come to our area, but the pandemic kind of shot them up here. And there's just that much more pressure throughout the region. It seems likely to me that that's not going to diminish entirely if the pandemic goes away somehow. Now all these people have tasted the outdoors and that may become more of a constant. So I think this is sort of an area that we would want to anticipate having to grow our resources in. And the funding, I won't express an opinion on the funding, whether it should be by area or it should be by general government, but I think generally speaking, we should be thinking about more bylaw enforcement. We're going to have to meet the pressure. Thank you.
This is another opportunity to use the COVID Restart Grant if there is an argument to be made that there is a required increase to the bylaw officer time due to the COVID pandemic. Director Richmond, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. We looked into that too, Suzanne. However, I also do agree with Director Crompton. It sounds like there's a different level of need or desire depending on the area and the director. So, you know, I know Director Rainbow has been very strong on trying to clamp down on short-term rentals, and there's a bylaw component to that. So depending on what each director is looking for their own area, sounds like we need to assess those needs and then how that get paid for, and what like Director Rainbow said, is it a partnership between District of Lillooet and the northern areas? I know, I'd love to support Russell, but we have no bylaw enforcement right now for a whole month. What we do have is completely off. So, we've been looking for a bylaw officer for about, I don't know, 3-4 months now. So all that to say, I would agree that it sounds to me like there is a different appetite for different levels of bylaw, and therefore it should sort of be assessed by the directors, maybe at an EAD, and decide what they would like to do. Thank you.
I have CAO Helmer and then Director Birch-Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention that if we did use funds for bylaw associated costs in 2021, that they wouldn't be there for funding that for future years. So there could be financial implications to future budget.
Director Birch-Jones and then Director Weed.
The reason that I just had staff and spent select funds on the signage around travel responsibly, respect rural neighborhoods, leave no trace, is because indeed in Area B, and I know it extends to A as well, massive influx of people coming up just as they did through the entire corridor. So it's an issue here just the same. Thank you. I'm delighted to hear there might be some use for some of the COVID funding, maybe for some of those extra costs. I didn't think of that. That's a new thought for me. Thanks.
I think we all want a piece of that 500,000, so it's not going to go that far if we're all dumping ideas in here. I have Director Weeb, then Director Demare.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, I know our bylaw officer has been part-time for quite a while, but with the COVID recovery, we were able to receive funds to increase her to full-time due to many offenses that are taking place and crime and this, that, and the other thing going on here in Lillooet. But I do believe that Director Demare brought it up yesterday or somewhere in a conversation about possibly sharing a bylaw officer with areas A and B. So I'm in full favor of something being put in the budget so that those two areas could contribute to Lillooet's, but because our main reason for not having full-time is budget. We cannot afford it. So if we had some sort of help there, I think it would be a great asset to all the different scenarios going on here. So I fully support what, that it be included in the budget somehow for the different areas.
Okay, Director Demare.
Yes, I'd like this topic to be brought up at the EAD meeting and have it on the agenda to discuss. I think it's for sure, as I mentioned yesterday, I'm looking at implementing a noise bylaw also for Area A. And, I did have discussions about how all this is funded. And so it looks like it's just general government where it currently comes from. So there is no real tax requisition specific to the bylaw officer. So it's definitely a discussion. The other aspect to it with the restart plan is we've been discussing a guardian program for our area for some paid positions, 1 or 2 paid positions to, especially for the spring, summer, and fall seasons. Very similar to what the First Nations guardian programs are that are federally funded. So this whole discussion is definitely true to my heart because it's so important. So I think the next step for us is to bring it up at the EAD meeting and discuss it there.
Okay, I didn't have anyone else on my speakers list. I think, Director Rainbow, go ahead.
Just to agree with what Director Demare was just saying, but just to recognize there's two parts to this discussion. One is that we've already allocated money for 2 extra days. We've got 4 days allocated, we're only using 2. So we have to find a way of using those other 2 days. But then I think there is a larger conversation to be had because and I think we should have it in EAD, to do with travel and accessibility and so, our current bylaw officer to come down to the Upper Squamish Valley, half a day out of her 2 days is spent traveling. So we need to look at all of that and come back with a proposal to the whole board. But I don't want to lose sight of those 2 days that we already planned for and where we talked last year about possibility of working with Squamish. So I want that to proceed. Thank you.
Okay, I think staff have lots to work with on that topic. Seeing no other speakers, let's move along. Suzanne, you're muted if you can.
Sorry about that. I was on another screen. So we're good to go to the regional solid waste budget. Yeah. Okay, so this budget does include a little increase to the zero waste educator contract to $15,000 for 2021. It also includes the carryover of zero waste initiatives, illegal dumping, which is increased just slightly to 25,000 as well. The diversion campaign is also included. There was a focus on organics and single-use plastics. That's being carried forward. This service also includes the communications full-time coordinator new position. I believe it was budgeted though. Let me double check something. I believe it was, yes, it was already budgeted in 2020 for this communications position. So it's just a carry forward into 2021. And really the expense line that shows this new communication time is 53200, time allocation from other services. So this new position will be housed in the UES department, which is a fully costing department, and they don't have a requisition for. So basically, they charge out all their time to where they're going to be working. It also includes the solid waste fee based on $4.50 per ton of waste dumped for District of Squamish, Whistler, and the Lillooet landfill. I reduced the requisition to 0 for this year because not a lot of expenses actually happened in 2020 due to the 2020 year. And so there is no requisition for 2021. And we're just using the transfer. We're just basically using the reserve and the transfer from the surplus carry forward. Sorry, not the reserve. Just the transfer from the surplus and the revenue for the dumping. And there is a small transfer to the surplus reserve of $8,407, and the surplus at the end of 2021 would be $142,000, which is quite large. So I don't anticipate having to requisition for a few years for this service. And don't think there's anything to note other than that. Are there any specific questions on the regional solid waste management budget?
I have Director Birch Jones and then Director Rainbow.
Thanks, Chair. Suzanne, I just heard you reference the Lillooet landfill under Utilities and Environmental Services. And so I know that they make some revenue and there's some fees. Was that a sort of cost neutral budget with the Lillooet landfill? And also I know we're doing a feasibility study on organics for the Lillooet landfill. Will we see that? Will we see those sort of smaller details in the budget at some point or not?
So this is just the regional solid waste budget. It doesn't include any of the Lillooet landfill expenses, just the revenue for their dumping. So there is a bylaw currently for the solid waste regional budget where we bill the District of Squamish and Whistler and the Lillooet landfill for their garbage per ton use. So that's just what I was talking to, was just the revenue coming forward for these items.
Thanks.
And Director Rainbow and then Director Demare.
I just have a question about the WildSafe BC Community Coordinator. First, I have to say that I thought he did a superb job this year. I'm not sure, was he responsible for working throughout the whole regional district? Or was he just in a few communities? Because I'm just wondering if we want to look at increasing the extent of the work of that person next year. I don't know where that, when, I don't recall seeing we had a report from him about what he had been doing, but I don't think we ever assessed the job and made any decision about continuing next year or expansion or whatever. So I'd like to look at that. I'd like to hear what other other electoral area directors think, and consider whether we need to make any changes to that budget.
Director Demare, go ahead.
Yeah, just on replying to Tony, Bridge River Valley Community Association got WildSafe funding, and we had our own coordinator up here on a part-time basis. So that coordinator was funded through WildSafe BC also. Actually, it was, I do believe it was seated, oh geez. Anyway, the Bear Committee down Coast to Cascades, they got the funding and funded that position. On another topic, illegal dumping project carried forward. So was there any work done on that last year? and this is just carried forward because no work was done?
There was just a small expense of $900,000, $900, not 100,000. So I'm assuming it was just carried forward.
Okay.
I think there was some signs purchased and things like that. And for the Wild Safe coordinator, this was a desire from Mary Lou to continue this for next year, for 2021. She was very impressed and excited about the 2020 project, so she wanted to carry it forward.
That's great.
Follow up, Director Demare, and then I have Director Weep.
Yes, I think the work that he was doing was excellent, and same with the contractor up for the BRVCA, and they did communicate together. And if the BRVCA doesn't get another funding this year for it, definitely want to see the SLRD Wild Safe coordinator work with our area also.
Thank you, Director Weeb, and then Director Race.
I'm curious, and I don't expect the finance person to have the answer, but possibly the CAO would know. The road up to the landfill here in Lillooet is paved right up to the gate. And then from the gate on, the road is a disaster. It's dirt, gravel, potholes, like you could beat your car up getting into the recycle up there. Is that the contractor's responsibility or the SLRD's responsibility? Because if it's the SLRD's responsibility, I really think it's something should be included in the budget to either pave it or do something up there. Like I say, you could lose a small car.
Okay, we'll take that away and we'll get back to you. Director Race, go ahead.
Thank you. It's just back in this sharing the cost of bylaw and stuff. And the first question was the illegal dumping project. And I wonder if that's maybe more bylaw enforcement or if there's something else involved in that. And you don't have to answer that now. But just sort of thinking about this, listening to the comments, it strikes me that, you know, the cost of, if we were going to increase the bylaw presence throughout the district, the cost might be apportioned partly to general government because there might be a base level or certain aspects of it that are sort of district wide. And then it seems that there might be some regional specifics depending on need and type of bylaw enforcement. And so there might be some electoral area specific costs associated with that going forward. I mean, I look at Area D, for example, and there's a huge amount of development pressure down there, obviously, and that generates or can generate a lot of bylaw issues. And it may not be the same as some of the other areas which have seasonal issues, et cetera. So anyway, I'll just leave you with that thought. It just struck me as sort of there might be a two-tiered approach to funding. And Sal, say hi to Deb behind you.
Hi, Debbie. Everyone say hi, Debbie, although she can't hear you because.
So anyway, I'll just leave you with that thought. But the other possibility that struck me, and I don't know what that $20,000 to $25,000 number is, but whether that could become part of an enforcement program or if there's some aspect of it that's enforcement. Thank you.
So yeah, those aren't definitely not enforcement expenses. They're just for building the campaign and outreach and materials and consultation, and they're not meant to be enforcement expenses.
Okay. You're good. Okay. Let's carry on then. I do recognize it is noon. If anyone is desperate for lunch, raise your hand now. If you can wait till 12:30, we can wait till 12:30. Seeing no hands, we're going to carry on till 12:30.
All right, so we'll go to the Utilities and Environmental Services Department. So there has been some staffing changes. Basically, the solid waste communication coordinator position was budgeted for half of the year in 2020, and this year it's for the full year. They're currently doing a recruitment for it now. Also, there is an increase for the Parks and Trails coordinator time to full-time as well in this budget. And so it includes all of the employees' expenses for training and any kind of communications and travel. Of course, it's still up in the air whether there will be much travel in 2021. Hopefully there will be allowed to have more travel. So there is additional recruitment advertisement expenses in advertising for the recruitment of the communications coordinator. And one thing I didn't mention is that these budgets also include a doubling of the staff health and wellness benefit for 2021 as a one-time added benefit for the staff. Most of the staff during 2020 had to do a lot of above and beyond their regular duties. And so it's just a thank you to the staff. And it does include additional software support for basically what the UES department uses for tracking all of the waste and all of the different transfer station wastes and everything like that is called Packway. So there is additional software expense just in the UES department for this Packway support and training. And there is a small contribution for the vehicle expense that is a contribution to all of the other departments to general government. And if anybody has any specific questions on the UES department, it is fully costed out. And so the revenue is in time allocation revenue. And that is basically the revenue back from the other services they are working on.
Any burning questions? Seeing none. All right, let's move along to regional transit, my favorite.
Not a lot has happened really in 2020 for regional transit, so it is just a carry forward of the projects from 2020. And so if anybody has any discussion points on this budget.
I'd like to make a resolution that we join TransLink. Sorry, that was a joke.
There are no seconders for your motion, so no, I'm just kidding. Any questions about this? Any suggestions or comments from anyone? I think this is a really big discussion for this year. We want to bring back the committee or the, what did we call it? It wasn't a commission. We want to bring back that discussion to an early in the year, either strategic planning or reconvene that group. I know that there's a lot of moving parts to that, but go ahead, Director Crompton, and then Director Rainbow.
I would just like to suggest that that group that you talk about be brought together sooner rather than later. It sounds like that's what you are already suggesting. And it feels to me like there's a bit of a informed strategy conversation we have to have. I think we have to understand what the province is thinking in those mandate letters. And so I'm not sure the order of things, whether we go and ask them for clarification first to inform our discussion, or whether we have a discussion in advance to understand what we want to ask. So I don't know the order of things, but it feels to me like we need to be informed. We need to have that full group together, and we need to, I think, be a part of guiding the discussion. Or it'll just happen to us, which I don't think will be a great direction.
No, Director Rainbow, go ahead.
Well, you mentioned strategic planning as a place to do this. I just remind you that this group included Squamish and Lillooet nations, and so I think we need a completely separate meeting of the whole group, and not just the boarders.
Yeah, that's
to do that sooner rather than later as well.
Okay. Any other input? No. Okay. Let's go along to RGS.
All right, so this budget also is mainly a carry forward from items not completed in 2020. We did increase slightly the RGS monitoring contract services cost to $9,000. It was $8,000 in 2020. And that's all that I have for talking points, unless anybody has any specific questions on the RGS budget.
Okay, I have Director Race.
Thank you. I just had a question about the Squamish Nation Reserve. Is there a reserve fund particular to the Squamish Nation? And where did that come from? Or what's it for?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, the Squamish Nation gave us these funds without requesting them for engagement for RGS. And so we've been holding them and using them as we have been engaging with the Squamish Nation, which, because the whole monitoring and everything's been put on hold for a bit, we haven't used them, but they were just funds that they gave to us. So I've been holding them in reserve, and then to offset any cost for communications or meetings, things like that.
And how much is in there, approximately?
$900,000.
The balance currently is 18,000. Sorry, I just lost it. 18,865.
Thanks. No, it's just interesting. I don't recall hearing about it before. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else on this topic? No. Okay. Let's go now. Where would you like to go from here?
So now it's just if there's any final comments or discussion points that the board would like to bring up, and then yeah, that's it.
Holy smokes. All right, Director Richmond.
Thanks, Suzanne. Are we? I know you put the reserve on the bottom of each budget, or it's included in the budget. Will you provide us as we go through the process with sort of just a straight list of reserves or surpluses, so we can look at the benchmark we've been trying to hit with those surpluses and see if we're above or below them, but like pull them out of the budget and provide a sheet listing them out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can do that for sure.
Thank you.
It's an excellent idea. Anyone else? Comments, questions, input? Director Elliott.
Well, it's hard. I don't have two screens today. I'm just wondering if we can highlight in the next iteration the things that are connected to our strategic plan, and maybe any initiatives that staff feel that we're maybe sort of like a green, yellow, red. So things that we're on top of, things that are in progress, and red maybe is not started or at risk. And just so that we can see, like, we have this budget and next year's budget to really see how far we can get on the strategic plan. It would be helpful at this halfway point before we have that strategic plan conversation to know what is specifically funding our plan this year and for the public to see that. Because obviously this past year has been so challenging for all local governments to move some of their initiatives forward. And so we might just have to make really good decisions about what, reprioritize and figure out what we can do going forward. But that would be helpful for me to see in the next iteration of the budget, is to have those specific items called out.
Yeah, I can definitely highlight those items with the colors based on what you've suggested.
I feel like I saw Director Weeb's hand. Nope. All right. Anyone else? All right. Well, I do like this process because I feel like it's not a one-shot, get all your ducks in a row in one meeting and speak now or forever hold your peace. I do like that we will unpack this again in the next opportunity. Okay. Do you have any desire for specific resolutions to come out of this at this time, or you just want to bring it back with the updated?
Yeah, I don't think there's a requirement for any resolutions as of yet. We'll just bring it all back with the changes requested and start the conversations again.
Okay. CEO Helmer, do you have any comments or anything at this time?
Thank you, Chair. If we could have a motion for receipt of the discussion.
Okay, moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Rainbow. Further discussion? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Then we are hang on. We are okay, so that was 6.2. We've done 7.1. There's no late business that I know of. Anyone? Nope. All right. Could I have someone move that we adjourn this committee of the whole? Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Weeb. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right. We will then reconvene the regular meeting of the regional district, and we will, sorry, I've lost my page. There it is. Director Clark, where are we at? We now have to disengage the live stream on the YouTube and go into closed?
Not quite. So item 19 is recommendations from the committee of the whole, and there were none. So then we will go into closed now.
Do you want us to leave this link and go back to the closed link? Or do you just want a minute to disengage?
Let's have a motion to go into closed, and then maybe we can recess and I can disengage.
Okay. Moved by Director Ray, seconded by Director Elliott. Anyone opposed? Motion carries.